Now, I absolutely love watching SpongeBob SquarePants growing up. Like, it was hilarious, it was cute, and frankly, when I grew up, I realized I was who I hated most. I was Squidward. But I'll forever remain confused on how and why a squirrel in a spacesuit lives underwater, but then again, SpongeBob is a sponge that lives in a pineapple underwater, so I mean, who am I to question anything? Lost episodes are the rare, scary Easter eggs that you don't want to find, believe me. They ruin shows for you, and they just ruin everything in general, really. But what is up, you guys? Hope you are having an awesome day. I'm your host, Eamon Hassan, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm bringing you the top 10 scary SpongeBob Lost episodes. Starting us off at number 10 is Patrik's leg. Now, the episode starts off normally, and Patrik and SpongeBob go sandboarding, and as Patrik tries to do a trick, he falls and loses his leg. He lets out this shrill scream that's haunting, to say the least. Patrik ends up on a wheelchair for a while, and girls keep wanting to sign his cast to the dismay of SpongeBob. Either way, that night SpongeBob goes to his house and tells them he can't see those girls ever again, and then they end up fighting, after which he tells SpongeBob that he hates him. Then SpongeBob starts beating Patrik's lost leg with a rock, but the dialogue and animation at this point are not matching up. The screen then cuts to Patrik playing with Jeffrey Jellyfish before going black once again. It then cuts to a CG animation of Patrik cutting SpongeBob's stomach open with some coral and very realistic blood coming out of him. SpongeBob, for some reason now, is laughing maniacally at this moment before everything goes black and the sound of static gets louder and louder. Ugh, ew. Well. Coming in at number 9 is the bootleg episode. This episode itself is a mix of static, random colors, and black screens. The audio isn't even intelligible, it's heavily distorted and includes some metallic screeches here and there. The tape itself was found by a group of 5 teens back in December of 2004. They were hanging around the back of a mental institution and they happened to find it in its bin. A, why were they hanging behind a mental institution? And B, why were they rifling through the bin? Maybe they deserve to find the tape, that's all I'm gonna say. The tape itself shows SpongeBob slouched over in a dark room and his eyes are bloodshot like he's been crying. 10 seconds later, he takes a bottle of pills from a nearby table while the screen is flickering between light and dark colors. The screams of children come on in the background before going silent as SpongeBob swallows all the pills. He drops to the floor holding his stomach and then starts frothing at the mouth before vomiting all over himself and eventually dying before the screen goes black. No one knows where the tape is now, and the teens that found it are also nowhere to be found. 2 of them committed suicide, 1 disappeared, and the other 2, well, God knows. Maybe only SpongeBob knows. At number 8, we have Squidward's Suicide Part 1. Now, this is probably the most famous Lost SpongeBob episode, hailing from none other than Creepypasta. The story is shared by someone who claimed to be an intern at Nickelodeon Studios back in 2005. The person worked with the editors and animators, and they always reviewed the new episodes before they aired. Sometimes the editors would just put up mock titles as a joke, and one day they saw the title card Squidward's Suicide. Now, thinking it was nothing more than a morbid joke, they decided to play it. Now, it showed Squidward finishing his concert, and then the frames started repeating themselves. The crowd starts booing Squidward maliciously, and it wasn't just the light cartoon-like booing, it was proper booing. You can even see SpongeBob booing the sponge that doesn't have a single mean bone in his body, or sponge, or whatever he is. Squidward is visibly scared, and everyone at this point has very realistic red eyes. We then see Squidward crying on his bed, but the sounds were split with what sounded like laughing, and then just screeching. And then the frames kept glitching. Filling at number 7 slot is Squidward's Suicide Part 2. Now, the lead animation editor rewound the scene frame by frame and saw a picture of a dead boy with an extremely mangled, bloody face. One of his eyes were hanging out and his stomach was cut with his intestines laying beside him. Horror took the room as the frames go back to Squidward, now crying blood. That went on for about 20 more seconds before the screen glitched again and the editor rewound once again. This time it was a little girl in a pool of blood. She was naked except for wearing underwear, and her eye was popped out just like the first boy. Her entrails were piled on top of her, and an intern in the room actually ran out at that point needing to vomit. It's honestly too much. Tears and blood continued to run down Squidward's face, and then all of a sudden the sound of a deep demonic laugh came and lasted 5 frames. When that was rewound, they could see a boy with his entrails being pulled out by somebody's hand. Again, one eye was popped out, and in the end, the last shot is Squidward staring at you with with a deep voice saying, "Do it," before he puts a shotgun in his mouth and shoots himself. That's a lot to take in. Now, obviously it's a creepypasta, it's probably fake, but still. Now, at number 6 is the yard sale, shared by an anonymous dad. He said he went to a yard sale a few years ago with his 2 sons, and they ended up buying an old box set of SpongeBob SquarePants. That night, the dad put on the episode for the kids for it to start off as normal. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? SpongeBob SquarePants, etc, etc, you get the gist. However, 5 minutes into the episode, the screen went staticky, and the only sound you could hear was the sound of someone running their nails down a chalkboard. Now I have goosebumps just thinking about that sound, and I didn't even hear it. I just hate it. Then some dialogue came of SpongeBob crying, but it was super distorted. He was saying, "You shouldn't have seen this," over and over again. Then Mr. Krabs comes on screen with his claws cut off and a countdown next to him. He starts counting down from 10 while saying, "If you turn off the tape now, none of you will survive." The kids started crying, the dad was freaking the hell out, and when the timer finally got to 0, the lights in the house went out. When they came back on, both his kids were gone. Coming in at number 5 is Sandy's Revenge. Back in 2006, this episode of SpongeBob apparently aired at 1:34 a.m. It started off with SpongeBob depressed as hell walking to Sandy's tree dome, and his eyes are bloodshot, so we can assume he's been crying. After standing outside her door for 5 minutes, he knocks, and at the 5th knock, Sandy opens the door, looking equally as sad. She lets him in, saying thanks for coming, and just as SpongeBob is about to open his mouth, Sandy lunges at him, strangling him to death. After she's sure he's dead, she ties his body to a wooden board before throwing it out of her house. Apparently, on the edge of a mental breakdown now, Sandy starts screaming as she starts trashing her own house. In the background, in a plot twist turn of events, we see Squidward lying on the ground, and we don't know if he's dead or not. Then he suddenly gets up and runs at her with a fork, but Sandy dodges him and chokes him to death. Sandy, who hurt you? At number 4 is The Birthday. This episode comes from someone who was looking for SpongeBob torrents online and downloaded this one titled Sorry SpongeBob. It starts with Squidward playing his clarinet as Patrik opens his door saying it's SpongeBob's birthday and that we're going to surprise him. Squidward then asks who's invited before saying they can't all surprise him. Patrik then says they'd love to, it's going to be so much fun, and then Squidward shouts no angrily before kicking him out, which honestly isn't that out of the blue since Squidward is just annoyed all the time. The screen then goes to black before going to SpongeBob's dark house with all the birthday guests waiting and whispering inside. When he walks in, the lights go on and everyone yells surprise, but the shock is so huge that SpongeBob screams and punches himself in the chest, causing himself to choke. Hyper-realistic blood starts pouring out of the holes in his body before his body finally hits the ground. His friends start screaming and running out of the house as Squidward comes in with bloodshot eyes. All he says is, "Patrik, I told you," before the screen cuts to his funeral. Falling on number 3 slot is SCARBOB DEATHPANTS. Now this person was trying to find a VHS tape for his little sister when he randomly came upon one labeled SBDP. It ended up being a SpongeBob VHS, and when he put it in, it started off with SpongeBob holding a butter knife as Patrik confronted him. Squidward had human eyes at this point photoshopped onto him as he lay on the ground. It then shows SpongeBob coming out of his house, but his house was covered in cuts and bloodstains because apparently pineapples bleed too. The hand that usually pulls his pants off is instead stabbed by SpongeBob. He cuts the hand into tiny bits and pieces before eating it. He then goes back inside his house to his bathtub, but instead of water inside it was body parts and blood. He then soaks up all the bloody water with the body parts before full on eating them. The boy watching ended up vomiting, and before shutting off the tape he heard Tom Kenny's voice saying, "You're next, kid." Tom Kenny being the guy who voiced SpongeBob. Now at number 2 is the KAMP KORAL Massacre Part 1. So SpongeBob has a spin-off show called KAMP KORAL that is set to air later this year. Some have managed to get the official reel of the show and decide to download it onto their laptop. It started off with a slowed-down version of SpongeBob's campfire song before the title KAMP KORAL Massacre came on screen. It then cut to the sign outside the campsite as fog began to roll in the darkness, and the camera zooms into a younger SpongeBob asleep on top of a bunk bed. Patrik is at the bottom, and they both wake up to the sound of heavy footsteps outside their cabin. They decide to investigate, but out of nowhere an image of a woman with her head split open flashes on the screen. As the two go outside, the fog gets worse as SpongeBob bumps into someone thinking it's Patrik. But Patrik's behind him, and after shining the light in front of them, they see this fish holding a hatchet. Dun dun dun. And finally, at number 1 is the KAMP KORAL Massacre Part 2. Now obviously at this point they run away screaming screaming for their lives as the fish chases after them. The other campers wake up and see what's going on as the fish heads for all of them instead. He hits one in the head as blood squirts on the campers around them. Campers start getting evacuated and the screen cuts to SpongeBob and Patrik hiding under their beds, clearly scared as anyone would be if a fish was wielding a hatchet. As the screaming dies down outside, Patrik gets up to look outside to see piles of bodies on top of each other. Thinking the fish is gone, he turns to SpongeBob to tell him the coast is clear, but suddenly starts spewing blood and falls to the ground. The fish hatcheted him in the back, and despite trying to escape, he grabs SpongeBob. Crying and begging for his life, the fish hits SpongeBob repeatedly in the face until he's unrecognizable and the fish is covered in blood. The last shot is showing the utter anarchy that befell the camp. The end. And that is it for today's video, guys. Very morbid. I never thought SpongeBob would get that dark. I always thought the only thing funnier than 24 would always be 25. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. As always, I'm your host, Eamon Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye. Squidward. Squidward is a Squidward. Why is Squidward such a hard word to say? Chalkboard.